Patrick Mahomes empties the backfield. 3 by 2. 3 left, 2 right of eligible receivers. Minimum protection. Mahomes firing. Chris Conley's got it back in the end zone. Touchdown, Kansas City.
That was part of a 6-touchdown performance by Patrick Mahomes against the Steelers back in 2018, hoping for another one of those here on Sunday as the Chiefs look to lock up a playoff spot and win their 8th straight game. Hey everybody, and welcome into our game preview this week presented by Crown Royal. My name is Matt McMullen, and this week we're joined by Aditi Kinkhabwala from NFL Network. She's going to help us break down Chiefs and Steelers. She spends a lot of time around the AFC North and knows the Steelers squad inside and out. Aditi, how's it going?
I'm just watching the COVID list like you. And hoping the COVID monster doesn't catch me, frankly.
Yeah, it's been a crazy week here in Chiefs Kingdom. The news kind of changing every day and every hour, trying to see who's going to be available for this game. We don't really know right now. We're keeping our fingers crossed we get some guys back. But for the context of this segment, we'll talk about the Steelers mainly here in this one. And we'll begin with the Steelers offense. It's still Big Ben in Pittsburgh in his 18th season as the Steelers quarterback. He's thrown for 19 touchdowns this year at 39 years old. So it's pretty impressive overall what he's been able to do. He has some playmakers at his disposal as well. Guys like Deontay Johnson, he has 1,000 receiving yards this year and 6 touchdowns through the air. Najee Harris out of the backfield, he has about 1,300 scrimmage yards this season. The Steelers don't run the ball a whole lot, but they still find ways to get him involved. This offense overall, though, despite having some playmakers, has only topped 30 points one time this season. They've struggled really collectively as a group. What do you make of the Steelers offense, and how can the Chiefs slow it down here on Sunday?
It hasn't been that hard to slow them down, quite frankly. So let's start with Deontay Johnson. This is a young man who has had the potential to be a game breaker, to kind of fill Antonio Brown's shoes since he got here. A year ago, he was racked by drops. The Steelers offense has kind of had fits and starts, but it is Johnson that has the home run ability at any point. The trouble is that the Steelers haven't been able to catch their receivers in stride much. And so the whole yak situation hasn't been particularly good for the Steelers, but definitely Deontay Johnson is target number 1. Now, as for Najee Harris, going into this past weekend, he had more touches than anybody else in the NFL. He wasn't just running the ball. He also was a huge part of the Steelers' receiving game. Ben Roethlisberger looks to him a lot to dump off the ball, just in general as a security blanket. Unfortunately, everything starts up front. And no matter what your skill players are, no matter what your quarterback is, you are only going as far as your offensive line. And the Steelers' offensive line has just not performed in a way that makes you feel incredibly confident. And so is Ben Roethlisberger getting rid of the ball faster than anybody? Yes, but part of that is out of necessity. I mean, granted, he can't run around and roll out and extend plays the way that he once could, but it would be nice if occasionally he had maybe 4 seconds to throw the ball. He doesn't. Najee Harris, he gets hit behind the line of scrimmage a ton because that line keeps getting pushed back. So, again, depending on how the Chiefs' defensive front plays, and I'll tell you this, Mike Tomlin could not stop raving about Chris Jones especially. That could be the key there more than any of the skill position players or any of the, as Mike Tomlin likes to call them, eligibles.
Yeah, it's interesting because we always talk about the skill position guys, but you can't really do much with those guys if the offensive line is struggling, and that's been the case, like you mentioned, in Pittsburgh all year long. One thing I will say about the Steelers here is that they fight till the end, so they've been outscored by 89 points through the first 3 quarters this year, but in the fourth quarter, they're outscoring the opposition by 49 points, so they usually get down by a whole bunch, but come roaring back later on. The Steelers team plays tight games. They usually get down often, but find a way late. Got to play a full 60 minutes against the squad because they keep fighting. And their defense kind of has a similar mentality. Their defense as a group has really struggled overall on the season, particularly lately. Since week 11, they're allowing about 30 points per game, really getting gashed in the running game. They've allowed almost 1,000 rushing yards since week 11 alone, but they keep fighting till the very end. We saw that against Tennessee last week, and this group does have some playmakers, guys like TJ Watt, he leads the NFL in sacks, and Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary. For the Chiefs offensively, how can they best attack the Steelers defense on Sunday?
Okay, so let's go backwards for a minute. You were talking about the Steelers' ability in the fourth quarter and their ability to kind of close out games. And when you think of the AFC North, this has sort of distinguished the Steelers and the Ravens. And that is this ability to close out games. It's knowing what it takes to come up with the big play in the big moment. And you talk about the Steelers defense. Yes, the run defense has been terrible. Look at Sunday against the Titans. The Titans rushed for more than 200 yards, and that's without Derrick Henry. The Steelers offense produced less than 170 yards. And yet the Steelers still won that game because they forced 4 turnovers. They were very opportunistic. And because Joe Hayden, a veteran savvy player, came up with a key tackle at the very end of the game, just short of what would have been a first down. So the Steelers are unbowed in that moment. They don't blink. They're not afraid. Ben Roethlisberger has been in enough games at this point of his career, after 18 years, that he's not sitting here panicking down 1 or 2 scores with 5 minutes left. And that's something that bleeds to the rest of the team. The one thing that the Steelers have going for them this year is that they have guys who seemingly come up with the big play in the big moment. And I'd say that about TJ Watt. It's not just his ridiculous sack numbers and his tackles for loss and his PBUs and all of that. It's that when the Steelers have needed a big play, whether it's messing with Lamar Jackson on a 2-point conversion attempt at the end of the game, whether it's forcing a fumble or coming up with a sack or a key tackle or whatever it is, TJ Watt has been there for them. So that, A, is definitely something to think about. The Steelers will never kind of wave the white flag. Then beyond that, the defense in general, it's just thin. It's thin, you know? When the Steelers lost Tyson Alualu, their nose tackle, early in the season, he is one of the most underrated players on this team, and I think in football in general. You know, he was their big run stopper, and he created a lot of opportunity for the 2 defensive ends, Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt. And as I say that, Stephon Tuitt hasn't played all year either. He suffered a massive tragedy this summer when his brother was killed in front of his mother, and, you know, he sort of had to deal with the emotional aspect of that, and then he was out of shape, and then had some knee issues that probably were related to his being out of shape, and he still hasn't suited up. So the Steelers' defensive front, without 2 of the 3 players, is obviously very, very significant.
Yeah, it's been a weird season for Pittsburgh, really, on both sides of the ball. And that's why I think for this team, you really have to throw the numbers out, because this team has veteran guys who have been there and done that. So they really play until the whistle blows at the very end. Got to fight this team for a full 60 minutes. The good news for the Chiefs is they really have a similar mentality. I mean, think about them sitting at 3-4 several weeks ago, and they fight all the way now to a 10-4 record, really in the driver's seat for the 1 seed in the playoffs coming up. So this Chiefs squad has a great mentality as well, and hopefully they can embrace that despite maybe some circumstances on Sunday, to get an 8th straight victory and to officially lock up a playoff spot. Aditi, awesome stuff. Really appreciate your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you so much, and have so much fun Sunday.